Well, Luke, welcome to the show. I'm pumped about you being here today. I've been working with you, or you've been working on me for quite some time. And I was just thinking about that this morning. How long has it been? Has it been 2.5 years or 1.5 years?
Yeah, about 2 years, yeah.
About 2 years?
Yeah.
So we met because I was having a lot of problems physically. And I didn't know really what was going on with my body. And I was seeing somebody else in your practice.
Right.
And I was trying to remember if she was just not able to be there or if she recommended. I think she recommended I see you.
Yeah.
Was that the case?
Yeah. I mean, our practice is kind of interdisciplinary, so we have different providers to treat issues that maybe we can't all figure out on our own. She specifically worked like pelvic floor therapy.
Yes.
And
we're not going to get into what that is.
Not today.
Definitely not today.
But there's the advantage of working with different providers is that if the cases kind of stump you, you can have a different, direct outlet. Like, okay, I can't really figure this issue out. Can you have a look?
Yes.
And that's kind of what happened, right?
Yes. And then I saw you, and I'll never forget it. You came in all talkity, you're just Mr. Social, right? Sometimes that's a joke. And you came in, you're like, so what's going on? And then you're like looking at me and pulling at my legs and stuff. And you're like, all right, we're going to do some needling. And I was like, okay. And then you flip me on my stomach and then you put all these things and you put this, I don't even know what it looks like, but I started feeling these pulses. And then you split. You left the room,
wow,
which felt like an eternity. And I remember thinking, and you told me it was the same pulse. Was it changing at the different needles that were in my back?
No.
So I don't know what was going on in my mind, but I was like, oh my gosh, it's getting worse and worse and worse. And which has been a joke of ours, because every time I come in, used to be Dr. Payne. And but I had been seeing the other gal at your practice for 6 months, 8 months, and it really didn't change much. I mean, she might have taken me, if my pain level my threshold was a 10, she might have taken me to like a 9. And I'd be on vacation, I'd call her, like, I was a mess. I saw you one time and you took me from like a 10 to like a 4, like the next day. And ever since, I'm like fascinated with what you do. And you're not this is going to sound wrong. You're not a normal chiropractor, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Is when you're welcome. Because when I think of a chiropractor, you go sit down with somebody and you lay down and they just crack you and they throw their body weight around and they crack every part of you. And there's been a lot of people that have complained that they've been hurt by chiropractors, whatever. And I think I went to see you. I mean, I've seen you for a long time. And of the 1.5 or 2 years I've seen you, I think you've cracked me like not even a dozen times. And when you do, it takes like 15 minutes to get in the knot you put me in. And you're like, hold this, move this. And then you're so gentle and you hear, and you're like, oh, that was a good one. And there was no weight throwing around and what have you. So I appreciate what you do. It's definitely changed my body. I think in the 2 years you've been working on me, I'm so much different. Still don't stretch a whole lot, but my body's different. So help me understand like how you got into this business and why I can tell you like it a ton. So give me a little background.
Grew up playing all sorts and kinds of sports from a very young age and through, club sports and through college, and always knew I wanted to work with my hands. Didn't know if that was going to be a physical therapy route or a chiropractic route or athletic training route. But ultimately, chiropractic gave me the opportunity to mold myself into the provider I am today, which is just, I tried to be as thorough as I can with patients and cases. So using skills that I learned from chiropractic college, also experiences and continuing education within physical therapy, within acupuncture, functional neurology.
And I know your practice, you'll tell me like once a month or every so often, you get together with other all of
our clinicians there.
Clinicians, that's what I was looking for. And you just share patient stories and different things to learn from each other, right?
Yeah, we try to stay up to date with current research and just be on the same page about certain issues.
And if a client has something, what's a technique that helped them or helped her or whatever, and just sharing that information has been awesome.
Yeah.
I've noticed it in the 2 years you've been working on me, where I'm like, wow, he hasn't, like, that's different. And I think recently you've been focusing a little bit more on my feet, which I hate feet. I hate it. But I always walk out feeling so much different. And I know a lot of the times when I have an issue in a part of my body, you're not even addressing that part of the body. You're addressing typically where that pain or discomfort's coming from.
Yeah.
Which is typically some other part.
And that was a hard thing to learn.
Yeah.
But it's more common than you think. It's getting away from symptoms and getting to the root cause of the issue.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard for patients to really
wrap their head around that. Like, why are you messing with that? I told you the pain was over here.
Yeah.
And you're like, I am working on that.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. So one of the times we were together, I don't know where I think the thought came from is when I start sending my sons to you who are in club sports, kind of the same type of background that you've gone through and that you just shared, and you started helping them, work on discomforts and issues that may not be issues now, more might be slight discomforts that can potentially grow into much bigger issues later. And then we started kind of hashing out this concept of how to take care of your body and the different phases that you go through. We ultimately, I think, ended up in calling those decades. And that's really what I want to talk about, is how to take care of your body in the various decades of your life. So let's start in the first one, that 0 to 10 phase where, you really can't necessarily take care of your body. You're not in a whole lot of danger because your body's rapidly growing. But what advice, would you give, or what are some things that somebody could do at home? Like, what's wrong with your body at that age? And what are some simple fixes potentially?
I think what we're getting at too is ways that we adapt and learn movements and behaviors, because a lot of the way we adapt and learn skills are based off of visual cues or social norms.
Like learned behavior, what you see here.
Like, you're going to throw a baseball the way you see your dad throw a baseball. Like, and there's also...
Or your mom.
Or your mom, or anybody, really. So
no disrespect out there.
And same thing with running. So you see feet, morphology. People say, "Oh, my son has my feet." Well, sometimes it's not necessarily that they came out of the womb with a certain foot type, but they watch your feet and the way that you move. And that adaptation just kind of happens subconsciously.
It does happen, because how many times have you heard somebody say, man, you walk just like your dad?
Exactly.
Or like you act, your mannerisms, and you don't realize that you've modeled your parents, the people in your life that took care of you, have modeled certain things, and you just, like you say, adapt to it, and you just start becoming it.
Yeah. And postures too. If you're always seeing... like the way that your brothers or parents sit at a dinner table, it's just an inherent kind of
So
behavior.
how do you take care? Like, so if you're 7 years old, I mean, at what age do you start seeing a chiropractor? Is that too early? Are there dangers in it? What's going on?
It's all reversible, just like that. You get into any position. It's a change that you maybe not consciously make, but your body creates, and it can be reversed. I don't know that you necessarily need treatment unless you're like in pain, or maybe I don't treat people for like morphology issues. That's
or
not,
what?
Like the way, like they don't like the way they look. I'm not going to be like,
fix the way I walk.
Let me just blast your T-spine. Yeah.
Well, like when we do that ankle exercise, when I come into your space, you have me sit on that triangle thing or kneel it. And then when I lift up, what snaps on my ankle?
Yeah, your peroneus longus and brevis.
Yeah. I love when he talks like this. Like, what? My what? Something snaps around a bone on my ankle. And you're saying I learned that by watching somebody walk or move a certain way.
No, that's from your like previous ankle injuries and playing soccer all your life.
Interesting. Because both of my boys have the same thing.
They might have like inherent, but they also play soccer a lot.
Yeah,
too.
they are.
So I don't know that that's really a correlation there.
So it's just what happens when you play a lot of sports or soccer, or kick with your feet.
I mean, yeah, ankle injuries especially.
But none of my boys have had ankle injuries that I know of.
Anytime you roll your ankle, you're spraining a ligament. Maybe not like a grade 3 where you're in a cast or a boot or something.
So even the little things can cause all
the little things can create a long-term change if it's not treated right, if it's not rehabbed appropriately.
Okay. So at the early ages, 0 to 10, what you're telling me, if it doesn't hurt, there's no real need to, there's no like preventative care. Don't go see a chiropractor as a baby, because I know that's been a little bit of a trend these days, where people are sending their 9-month-old or 12-month-old to go see chiropractors. Where are you at on all that?
Personally, that's not really my forte.
Why?
I know people do it. It's just not the way our practice runs, and it's not the type of clientele.
Is there legitimate reasons behind it that say it's bad for the body, or
not what? That it's no, I wouldn't say that. I'm sure it's a safe, it's very ethical. I'm just saying, like, personally, we treat like more musculoskeletal injuries. So unless you have that, like, ankle sprain or
some kind of injury
or like neck pain,
no problem. Okay, fair enough. So straight from the guy who makes money working on people, says, "Hey, if you're
like,
not
I know
hurt,
people
go.
do it, but that's just not where we practice at."
Yeah, and I'm fine with that. Okay, so from 10 to 20, this is when I feel like personally, when most as an athlete, growing up athlete, most of the problems in your body start to really, I'd actually say from 10 to probably 30, right? Is when you're the most active athletically, when your body's the most subjective, because you're playing at whatever level where you can get hurt. I know you can get just as hurt older. That's more of a mental game that you're like, hey, you're not young anymore, so slow down. But in those ages, you run at your top speed. You play as hard as you can because your body's, quote unquote, in the best shape of its life. So from 10 to 20, like when does somebody need to see a professional? Like, how do they take care of their bodies? How do they prevent bad injuries from taking place, if possible?
If we're talking about really sports-wise, you see a lot of kids developing motor patterns around different joints, hip joints, shoulder joints, ankles. Sometimes those need to be addressed and worked through with a
Can you give me an example?
With a professional. So if you have a kicker or soccer player, you might be demanding a lot of strain and stress on your hips, and it's always like a one movement in one direction. So what happens is you might lose what's called joint centration within your hip, which is just an imbalance of ligament tension from the bone that sits in your hip socket.
Okay.
So anytime that movement happens, let's say the bone, your femur kind of shifts forward a little bit because there's a laxity in anterior ligament, you're going to get a ligamentomuscular reflex where a lot of the muscles around that joint, around that capsule, tighten down and help stabilize that joint, bring that hip back to where it's centrated. So it has equal pressure, 360 degrees around. But if you do that over and over again, you're creating like a spasm and a loop reflex where those muscles that tighten up become less oxygenated because of their just being over recruited. Creates muscle tension that decreases blood flow into the muscle. Blood flow brings oxygen, so now your oxygen levels are lower. Trigger points develop, and now you get pain in that hip. You can't really figure out why. Like, why can't I keep kicking? I've been kicking great for the past 10 years, and now all of a sudden, like, I'm having pain, but I didn't get like hit or
there's
like
no
tackled.
injury,
right? So sometimes it's it's an overuse of little micro trauma or muscle imbalance within that hip.
So seeing somebody like you can put them on a program to loosen everything else up. And what did you say? Everything can be undone earlier.
Right.
Or you can retrain your body or get that full motion back.
Right.
Without necessarily cracking. And I guess this is the norm
right.
that I want to break on this specific show, that not all chiropractors are created equal. From a lot of chiropractors, rightfully so, when you go see them, all they want to do is crack. Other chiropractors like yourself, they want to look at your muscle skeletal or whatever, all these huge words that you keep saying. You understand, not that they don't understand the science, but you work more on the muscles sometimes. Sometimes you use needles. Sometimes you use other bits of technology to direct better movement, change to the body, instead of just saying, okay, your muscles are out, or your skeletal, your bones are a little out of whack. We're just going to put them back. Where you're like, no, let's adjust the muscles, and the muscles will put the bones back. Am I saying that right?
And I want to like restore optimal motion and optimal mechanics within the joints. I want to not just look for, like, that same person that has that hip issue. They might come into the office and they're like, my knee is killing me. And if you go to the right provider, they're going to look up or down the chain and say, like, well, it's not really your knee that's the issue. Maybe it's this hip, because you can't really stabilize on this hip. And that can happen anywhere in the body. That can happen in your spine.
Well, the reason why I came to see you is I was having bad issues in my groin.
Right.
And you're like, it's your back and your hip.
Right.
And I'm like, it's my groin.
Right.
And you're like, okay, lay down. Let me put a couple of these needles in you. And I was like, oh my gosh, maybe it's not my groin. Like, you made me a believer in one visit.
And that was like the issue, is you were getting treated at the groin, and that's part of it, but you weren't able to get to the source of the issue.
And now I have no pain 2 years later. I mean, it's not an issue at all.
Now you have other issues.
Oh yeah. All right, so let's talk about years 20 and 30. This is when you're really growing into being an adult. Your body is, I don't want to say getting to the point of no return, but definitely where those learned behaviors become a lot more succinct and part of your everyday life. So what happens here? Like, help me understand. Maybe is this the point where pain doesn't matter and you need to see a professional? Is there certain stretches or things that somebody can do at home? Like, what's going on in the body in this decade, and how do we prevent injuries later in life in this decade?
I would say generally you're not growing nearly as much, if at all, through these ages. You are less likely to be as probably active as you were. So things start to slow down, especially as you get into your late 20s. You're getting into work.
Sitting a lot.
Sitting or doing like repetitive motions on your feet, over your head. These all can lead to, again, repetitive type injuries, issues. Yeah.
So how do you take care of yourself in this decade?
This decade is it's still just about moving and understanding what kind of life you're living. If you are living a sedentary lifestyle, moving more. If you're doing too much, maybe it's about rebalancing, being on your feet too much.
Have you ever started that show, the Blue Zones that we talked about?
You told me about it. I haven't seen it though.
So one of it's a show on Netflix about what they call the blue zones, and it's certain, I think it's 7 or 9 blue zones around the world where they have the most centenarians, so people that live to 100 or more. And one of the things that they've realized in all these different places, they try to figure out like what's in their diet, what do they do, like how are they all living, like the average person or a certain type of people in that region lives over 100 years. And you just said something that triggered that thought. Most of them are super active, well into their. Actually, I was watching this one show. My wife walked into the room, And she's looking at the TV and she's like, "What are you watching?" I'm like, "That show about 100-year-old people." And there was a guy on a horse, and he was from somewhere in South America. I don't remember the area. I was like, "How old do you think that guy is?" And she's looking at him. She's like, 90. I'm like, "You really think he's 90?" And I was like, "He's on a horse. He's like lassoing cows, herding all these cows up this river. I mean, like super active." And I'm like, not everybody not everybody that they're filming is 100 years old in the show. I'm like, "You really think he's 90? Like, if you didn't know what I was watching, give me a guess." She goes, I'd have easily guessed probably 50. He was 102. And he was, I mean, lassoing I can't even, I'm in my 40s. Like, athletically, sure. But could I actually do that? Probably not. This guy was 102 years old. My mind was absolutely blown with what this guy was doing at that age. Still works. I don't remember exactly. But I know he gets up super early. He works like 16-hour days, like 6 or 7 days a week at 100 years old. Like, is there science behind this of why? Like,
I mean, the only thing I can think of is motion and movement. They create better joint surfaces. They can create more of more. You think about doing things you love. That's a dopamine rush, and you have to keep moving and doing things you love to keep moving forward. I'm guessing that guy loves riding horses, catching cows.
Whatever, yeah. He looked like he enjoyed it, and he looked pretty young. If you look at his face, you couldn't tell he was however old he was.
Botox is great,
huh? I don't think he could afford it. Wasn't a wealthy area. All right, so let's talk about the next decade. Which is the 30 to 40-year-old, right? I just had my mind went out.
Yeah.
So for here, what's going on in the body that we really need to be careful of when we're 30 to 40?
This is the part of your life, I guess, where metabolism, it does start to
unfortunately
decrease a little bit.
Slow down.
We don't shut them like we used to, and
it's probably because we started new habits of sitting at a desk and different things where we're not as active as we were in your teens, right?
Yeah, and injuries and postures, they all build on themselves, So the injuries and tensions in your body, they get even larger and manifest into different areas, different pain syndromes. Yeah.
So how do you take care of your body? How should you take care of your body from 30 to 40?
Lots of this is where you're probably stretching and doing other activities other than going out for a walk is great, but doing more than that.
Like a run? A bike?
Yeah.
Anything other than walking?
Or other movements too. Like not just in a front plane, just like, moving, like playing tennis, playing pickleball.
Doing something.
Yeah.
So this is just totally random, but I was taking a walk this weekend, Saturday or Sunday, and walking out of my neighborhood, cutting into another neighborhood. There was there's an older couple, definitely Chinese or Japanese, Asian. And they had on, I don't know what they're called, but like a samurai type of an outfit or some, whatever they call them. And they had swords and they're doing those slow movements. And I'm walking and I'm watching this. I didn't know, when I was further away, I was like, am I just about to get chopped up in a bunch of pieces, And then closer I got, the lady was completely in her world of stretching or whatever she was doing. Her eyes were closed. She was not seeing anything around her. And then the guy behind her was just kind of standing. And then I smiled like, hey, nice friendly guy over here. And then he smiled back and waved. And I was like, all right, I'm not going to die. But the point I'm bringing it up is that type of movement they were doing, I don't know, whatever chi or what. I don't know anything about it, but it looked very healthy.
Yeah, I think it's about de-stressing yourself in any way that you can. Maybe more
Physically
and mentally too.
and mentally.
At this decade, if you have kids or not, maybe you have those stresses, maybe you have financial stresses, but being able to regulate that on your own, I think is pretty important.
To your body physically.
Yeah, because the mental stresses can manifest physically.
That's a big point. Help me understand this better.
Well, you are mentally stressed, you have a more sympathetic response from your autonomic nervous system. Sympathetic responses result in like an increased heart rate, increased perspiration, increased blood pressure.
All stemming from the mind.
From whatever stresses you have in life.
Interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but not just like I'm in pain all the time. Maybe it's more like I hate my job. Maybe that's like a perpetual stress. And that sympathetic influx, it gets pushed through your body. As a result, we have the sympathetic reflex so that we can jump into action and run away from a threat or be active about a threat. So that's why you get more blood flow towards your muscles, away from your gut. But you're not using that. You're just sitting at your desk thinking you hate your job.
Mm-hmm.
So now you develop just high blood pressure. Now you develop anxiety.
Man.
And all sorts of other things like hair loss, like all this other stuff.
Hair loss because you're stressed? Dang.
Never heard of that, right?
We kind of came to the conclusion that some of the issues that I first met you with was all started by stress. So, because there was no event that took place in my life that caused my groin to have all the pain. And even when I went to see, doctors that did and I took every test in the sun twice.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, there's really nothing wrong with you. And then when we started working together, that's when you're like, it's your muscles tightening up. And I think it was the stress that was causing a lot of that which was causing all the problems in my body.
And pain can be a manifestation of all sorts of threats, internal and external, from your world. Right? Pain could just be like a protective mechanism. So if you say, like, I'm riding a bike all the time and I have overdeveloped postural muscles in my neck and my back, and that tightness isn't going away. My kid is getting constantly in trouble at school. My neighbor is annoying me constantly. Financially, I'm not where I want to be. All of those threats and stresses, they just like add up and pile up on each other till you reach a threshold and your brain just creates a pain in somewhere by just as a protective mechanism to say, like, this isn't right. I'm gonna put you in pain so that you do less.
Jeez.
It's a weird thing, right?
It's a brilliant thing if you think about it.
Yeah.
And it's astounding that your body is smart enough to do that to slow you down.
But then what happens is people get mad at themselves for like, why am I in pain now?
Why am I like this?
Yeah.
How do you at 30 to 40, how do you prevent that? Like, how do you take care of your body?
Just understanding, where you are in life and what are the good things? What are the bad things? What's driving you?
The stresses, understanding the stresses. It sounds like this is when this is really starting to creep in. Like family, kids,
I'm not
career.
there yet, but sure.
Some of us are past that.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
I mean, you have a new child at home.
Yeah.
And he is 6
He's like 5 months.
5 months. So you're starting to understand some of the stresses of a child.
Right.
Yeah. And how it wrecks your life, good and bad in some regards.
Right.
It's just totally different.
Yep.
And it does things to your body, right?
Yeah. And if you're not willing to accept those changes, then that can create more stress in your life.
Like the lack of sleep deprivation.
Sleep
First, early
deprivation,
on as a
huge.
child, you're like, what is happening?
Right.
Like I haven't slept straight for 6 hours in like
Right.
2 months.
I think when you first approached me with this podcast, it was right after I had him.
Yeah.
Or we had him, and you were talking to me about it, and I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about.
I can't even think straight. I haven't had sleep in months.
Sure, I'll do it, but just remind me later what we just talked about.
So what you're telling me, what I'm understanding here, literally, I think it started from the decade of the 20s, now creeping into the 30s and 40s. Your mental state, because maybe in the first decade, maybe in up until you're 20, and maybe earlier today, your mental state doesn't wreak as much havoc early on, but later on, the tie between stress, mental anxiety, what's going on in your life and your body gets super, I mean, it's always tight, but early on, we're just not as stressed. Later on in life, you can't get rid of it sometimes. And you're just like, everywhere I look, my life sucks. Even when it's good.
Right.
Because every news out, like everywhere you look, it's negative. And, when you're young, everything's free and fun. And when you're old, you're like, everything sucks. And then your body starts to get tore up.
Yeah. I think that's when having an outside resource to talk to and talk with about these issues, that can be super helpful. It can, because you don't realize that you're getting caught up in semantics, and that there's a volcano erupting and you get really pissed off about it.
Yeah. What's that have to do with me?
Right.
So let's go the next decade and land some of this. We got 40s to 50s and really 50 plus. We can kind of put some of this together here. What's going on in the body between, 40 and older?
I guess you can start seeing more of degenerative type changes that happen within your skeletal system. Unless you're in a blue zone, then that doesn't affect you. I know women start going through hormonal shifts that can affect them physically, emotionally, mentally. This is probably where like my biggest demographic of patients are, just because it just
happened to land right in there.
I guess, but I think it's this is where you finally reach that threshold of like, all right, I need to take care of myself, do something, because you're just powering through in your 30s and 40s, and then
40s and beyond, you're like, yeah, I need help.
Yeah.
So this is when most people start to see you.
I would say that's, majority.
So what do we do to take care of ourselves? And when do we need to see a professional?
It could be as little or as large as like I'm not really having pain, but I don't like the situation I'm in physically. As far as like I go to work and I sit down and I'm not comfortable, or the fact that you're in pain all the time. I think anybody can use help.
Yeah, I totally agree. And
it comes down to identifying the major issues. If it's a low back issue, or if maybe it's a foot issue, maybe it's a neck issue. It's about identifying what's going to make the biggest change for this person, and what kind of modalities and therapies are going to be most effective for that person.
So this is where I'd like to shift the conversation before we end it. How do you know who's a good chiropractor versus a bad one? There's an easy question for you.
I think just generally you're going to trust your gut. If you feel like you're getting pushed around and you're in and out, and
the pain doesn't get fixed.
Yeah, I mean, generally people know if they're being cared for or not. Like if it's if everybody's getting the same treatment, maybe that works for most people. Maybe it won't work for you.
A A lot of chiropractors that I've been to in my life, I've been in some where it's just a conveyor belt. Like people come in, they get the same adjustments, one after the next, and you sit in the waiting room, and some of them are wide out in the open, and you can see everybody getting adjusted. And you're like, how can the same 10 people that just walk in have the same problem? Because they're all getting the same exact adjustment. I've had some issues with that, and I've stopped going to some of those people.
Yeah, I mean, it works for some people. That's all they want is to get pops
And be done.
It's more of a business transaction, in my view.
Of that type of chiropractor?
Yeah.
Or that type of service?
And you can get that like any kind of service. Like, PT could be the same way. Every low back patient gets the same 5 exercises. Like in your world, financial services, like, oh, you're this demographic, you're going to get this plan. Instead of like getting to know the person.
And understand somebody. That's a true statement. In every type of space, you can find the people that just do the same thing and people that personalized it. How would you find somebody that personalizes it? Because I don't know too many people are like, no, I want the same treatment everybody else gets versus, no, I want the things that's going to work on me. Like most people are going to say, I want that. How do you find that in your space?
I would say most of our marketing is internal, so it's more just patient recommendations. Word of mouth. I don't know. I guess not going to like the chain type rehab places. If that's something you're looking for, like personalized treatment, you might find it at those the chain places, like The Joint, all across the world.
Mm-hmm.
But you might not.
All right. So give me a couple things that I can do, anybody else can do to take care of themselves while they're at home, just as preventative care at any age.
Biggest thing might be hydration.
Really?
Yeah, just keeping your body hydrated. We are made of water, and our fascia depends on it. And our fascia is what holds us upright and keeps us mobile. So hydration is huge.
That's interesting. Of all the things I thought you would say, that would have never ranked. The last time I saw you, I think you were doing something on my calf, and you're like, you're dehydrated.
Oh yeah, you were.
Yeah, see, and you're like, you're super dehydrated. I'm like, you're like, you need to drink more water, and I'm normally not, but that particular day, you were like, and you can tell, just by messing with somebody's skin, if they're dehydrated or not. That's interesting. So, besides water intake, what else?
You want like an exercise or a stretch or
whatever you think would be valuable to somebody that could really help them, no matter what age they're
at. Just moving and doing what you love. I think just managing your stress load and moving well. I think that's what keeps people going.
So if you love walking, you love playing tennis or pickleball or things, just go do it. Take it easy.
In my opinion,
enjoy it. All right, that sounds good. All right, so how do people get a hold of you?
Here in Charlotte, I work at 2 different locations at Performance Rehab Associates. We got the Cotswold Eastover area and then Pineville.
And I know you're not going to say this, so I'm going to say it for you. You've worked on, in your career, tons and tons of professional athletes. Like you work on just everyday normal people like me,
right.
And then you are very, very specialized to where your organization, I know you personally work on basketball, football, soccer, like in baseball players from all over the country. I know sometimes I walked in there, I'm like, who was that? You won't say anything. I know early on you didn't. You're a little bit more trusting in me now, but like your resume and who you work with, I mean, you are trusted by some incredible, high, prestigious organizations in Charlotte. I know you're not going to, say that, so I'm going to say it for you. And then what's your website? Where can people find you?
PRA Charlotte.
PRACharlotte.com?
.com.
Okay. Any phone number that you have off the cuff?
I don't know that.
Yeah, most people don't. Every time I ask, I'm like, I don't know what their phone number is. That's so funny. Yeah. All right. So PRA Performance?
PRA Charlotte.
Charlotte. but the name of the company is
Performance Rehab Associates.
Performance Rehab Associates. Awesome. Well, this has been super educational for me.
Good.
I'm glad you did this. There's definitely some more topics that I'm going to want to chat with you. I know you've been dealing with some allergies today, so thanks for digging in and sharing some of your expertise. And I personally thank you for taking care of me.
Yeah. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah. Awesome.